Good morning, everyone. My name is Wes Coughlin. I'm the Senior Editor for Technology at the Economist Intelligence Unit. And we're here today for a live stream event about how airlines can become retailers. This is going to be a discussion today, both with the panel and online, about how airlines can be using more advanced data analytics to understand their customers better and to deliver better products and services to them. We're broadcasting to you live today from the NASDAQ Center in New York City. And the session is not only being attended by our panel, but being attended by about 600 airline executives from around the globe, representing over 80 airlines. Today we're going to have 3 one-hour sessions, and it'll be structured like this. We'll be starting on the hour, and then we'll speak. The panel will go for about 40 minutes on various topics, and then for 10 minutes we'll be taking questions, which we'd like to get from you. More on that in just a moment. The three sessions will be as follows. The first will be the evolution of the customer experience to date in airlines. That's a discussion of how we have gotten here today on data analytics, customers, and airlines. The second is going to be the airline data, the next generation. That'll be a discussion with the panel and with questions about what airlines are doing now to become more like retailers, more able to get closer to their customers, better able to use data. And then finally, we'll talk about the transformation of the airlines. That will be a discussion about the future of data in the airlines and sort of the holy grail and the end game that we're going to be looking for. Each session will start on the hour. Please send us your questions. Please send them via Twitter to hashtag Saber360, and we'll take as many of the questions as we can. I want to say thank you for everybody for attending today, and I'd like to now introduce our panel, if I can, starting with you, Ian. Can you tell us about yourself?
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join the panel discussion today. My name's Ian Mika. I'm the executive for commercial distribution at a listed company in South Africa called Hama, and today I'm representing our Kalula brand. I look after marketing, e-commerce, loyalty, sales and distribution, our third-party travel ancillary businesses, and customer experience. Thank you.
Vitrine is sort of our host today. He's from Sabre. Vitrine, could you say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Hi, on behalf of Sabre, welcome. And thank you to all of our airline friends and participants here. My name is Vinit Doshi. I'm responsible for SabreSonic Customer Sales and Service, which is our reservations, inventory, and departure control system. Look forward to a very lively and interactive discussion today.
Gary traveled the farthest from here to get here, via airlines, of course.
Good morning. My name is Gary Hama. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Virgin Australia. I'm pleased to be here. I look forward to a healthy and lengthy discussion on the topics at hand, and we'll see what kind of questions we get when we get there.
Thank you, Gary. Amy?
Amy Ber from Virgin America. I'm in charge of our distribution channels and our sales support groups. So I oversee all of our distribution channels, strategy implementation, e-commerce, all the traditional channels, as well as things like the contact center and our reservation system with Sabre. So that is my area of expertise, and thank you very much for having me.
Hi, I'm Stan Boyer, Vice President of Solutions Marketing for SabreSonic Customer Sales and Service. I work a lot on our innovation strategy and transformation initiatives.
Timothy?
Hi, my name is Timothy O'Neill-Dunn. I am the Managing Partner for T2 Impact, and I think I'm here to give some perspective perhaps on what our colleagues here, both from the Sabre side and the airline side, have to say. Thank you for having me today.
So thanks to the panel for coming. Again, we're looking forward to your questions to be sent to us on hashtag Saber360. Our first discussion is on the evolution of the customer experience of the airlines to date. That's sort of a look into the past and how we got here today. Vitrine, I'd like to open up with a question for you. The Economist did a survey earlier this year, and what we found was that fully 81% of airline executives say basically they've made great progress in dealing with their customers. When you go to the customers, 66% are saying that airlines have made that progress. So there's definitely progress being made. There's a big gap. Why is this industry perhaps out of sync with its customers?
Well, I think it's a terrific question, and I think it was eye-opening when we actually did the survey and the kind of results we saw. I think at the heart of it is, it's relativity. It's the reference point. So if you think about airlines, of course, they've made progress year after year in terms of, looking at customer experience as a differentiator. If you think about price war in the industry, someone puts a new fare out or new set of fares out, you can match that in a matter of seconds or minutes. Sure, if everyone's doing merchandising around bags and seats, and we'll talk a little bit about it, okay, so can your competitors. So the question is, what's going to drive customer loyalty, and how customer loyalty is going to ultimately impact your revenue and your top line as well as your bottom line. So the context is airlines are gradually putting more and more onus and focus around all things customer and customer experience. But if you think about travelers on the other end, for them it's relative to the experience they get from other industries, other companies. So you think about the experience they get from the Amazons of the world, from the Netflixes of the world, from the Ubers of the world. So for them, it's the consumer experience that matters the most. So it's all relative. So airlines still have a little bit of ground to catch up relative to the experience that consumers get from other industries, other companies, so to speak, other business models. But the opportunity is there. And we're seeing a shift as airlines think about, hey, the focus on revenue per seat is gradually shifting towards revenue per customer. What's the value of the customer to the airline? So again, if, in short, I think the answer is what's the reference point, for the airline, and it's relative to what they've done. And for consumer, it's the service that they compare with, I think, what they're getting from other industries.
So customer service is heightening, but customer expectations is heightening perhaps even faster.
Right. That's right.
So for the panel, what are some of the lessons? What are some of the things that perhaps airlines could be learning from retailers in terms of relationships with their customers? Any thoughts?
Well, certainly, I think Amazon's a very good example of a company that has taken information about what its customers want and like, and what other customers like that customer want and like, and really presented a different experience for their guests or their customers. The issue that the airlines have, of course, is that for years and years and years we've kind of been stuck with kind of these legacy models of how we've dealt with information and how we've dealt with our guests and the concept of revenue per seat as opposed to what's the value of our guest. And so for us to make that shift, it takes time, and I think airlines are starting to chip away at it. But that I see as the really big reason why there's such a gap is we think we've made a lot of progress, and we have, but the customer is like, okay, not nearly like an Uber who comes out right out of the box and just blows up customer expectation, right? We always expect immediately to have our car. So I think that is really the problem, is that some of the newer companies and the newer experiences that guests or that customers have now really changes what their expectation is of us, and we're just slower to be able to change.
Yeah, and I also think that as we've the industry itself has been through a number of shocks over the last few years in terms of spikes in the oil price, and we've also been very focused on making our businesses as efficient as possible to ensure that we can operate. And that's essentially what our businesses are about. Our business, specifically in South Africa, is very much a short-haul, efficiency, low-cost carrier business. So we need to turn aircraft around in half an hour. We need to get people off the aircraft. We need to get new people onto the aircraft. And a lot of those kind of processes are not as customer-centric, I guess, as they can be in terms of this kind of efficiency that you need to extract. But as you've extracted those efficiencies and upgraded your fleet and ensured that you've really got the most out of a cost per seat, what is the ability for you to now improve your business? And that improvement is going to have to come from a revenue perspective, and meeting the customer's needs and requirements from a customer expectation point of view is certainly now a big focus in terms of how we can improve the revenues that are coming through our business.
You're setting yourselves a pretty tough goal here. Amazon starts off with a clean slate. Airlines have to deliver 100% safety, move people from A to Z, all these things.
So true.
It's meeting the expectation of the customer, period. People that fly day in and day out have one set of expectations. People that fly twice a year have a completely different set of expectations. It's meshing and finding the happy medium between all aspects of the business is really what drives the differential that the survey showed. A platinum member that flies, all he wants to do is be treated well, leave on time, arrive on time. My baggage needs to show up, compared to somebody traveling with small children have a different set of needs. And that's where we need to focus as a business. Put the customer first, everything else will fall into place.
Right. And I think to your point, Gary, that it can be one and the same person. So the gentleman that's traveling on business one day is traveling with his family the next day. And speaking from personal experience, I'll just point this at myself, that there's a saying I like to put forth, and it's that as humans, we're all delightfully inconsistent. And so while I have a core set of things that I value and expect from the airlines that I fly, that can change depending on which persona I'm representing on each trip.
And it's driven by individual market as well. There's certain
Absolutely.
markets that are pure leisure markets. The expectations are different in those markets compared to a highly truncated business market. New York to Atlanta, as an example, the expectation's completely different than going to Aspen in the winter to go skiing.
So let's say that you're an airline, you've mastered safety, of course, you're moving people efficiently. Let's even say that fuel prices have dropped and you have some investment capital to invest in moving forward on serving your customers better. What are some practical steps that you should be taking? If tomorrow morning you're showing up, you've got to do 2 or 3 things, can't do everything, what would they be? I see Timothy smiling as if he knows, as if he has the answer.
Well, I think there's several things that you need to basically assume. So you start off with this view that we're actually at a fairly good steady state at the moment. Different pockets of the world a bit differently, but the first thing I think is you have to start off with a clear definition of what you want to do. I think airlines are still struggling with the notion of what is a product. And the customer is absolutely struggling with what is a product. You don't know what the airline product really is. You have, as we were talking earlier, you have these clear expectations of things that you could expect to happen. But what is the product? For me, I'm a frequent traveler. I want as frictionless travel as possible. Just don't put barriers in front of me. Just take a lot of this stuff out the way. Whether we like it or not, there is so many obstacles to a clean purchase and a clean delivery of product that exists outside of our world that we have to live in. But we've also overcomplicated the product. For whatever reason, price obfuscation has always been an airline core concept. Now what do you do when you've reached the level of, well, okay, I can deliver product. How are you communicating that to the customer? And I think this is where there is clearly a level of disconnect in the channels of communication, the type of communication, not to mention the message. Because frequently, as has happened for many, many years, the expectation of the message is here, the delivery is way down here. And the old story about you're only as good as the last time you delivered your bag, on time maybe, is still relevant to us. So everything can be blown away with one single simple thing, which may be beyond your capability of handling. But I think what needs to happen for airlines to do, absolutely day one, is let's understand what our product is. Let's communicate that product relevantly to our customers, because I still think that is not in the core mindset of airlines. I think they're trying to do that. I just don't think the execution is there yet.
I think maybe following on from that, another very important thing to do is to really understand who your customer is. So data then becomes a very crucial part of analyzing and getting this understanding of who these customers are. And once you have a formal kind of view in terms of all the different segments of customers, you need to actually speak to them. You need to actually engage in a journey mapping exercise where you kind of sit down with your customers, you interact with them, you understand their emotional journey throughout your journey, you understand what's important from their perspective in terms of ultimately what their expectations are. And certain things are going to be much more important than others, and we might think something small is very important to fix, and they might not. So to have that understanding and to get that perspective through engagement with the customer, not only through initial sessions,
And
but
through data,
but also developing systems to ensure that you're constantly communicating with them and you're constantly getting feedback. So there's a host of information out there through the social media domains, obviously through blogs that customers might write into. And you've got to collect that data, get a full understanding of that data, and then use it moving forward in terms of the products that you design, and ultimately trying to meet the expectations of the various different customer segments. And you need to become a lot more flexible in your delivery to ensure that at the end of the day, that person traveling with family, you can accommodate and cater for that person's needs, along with a corporate who's looking for that seamless experience.
Well, and I would add to that, I think the next step of that, and I think probably one of the places where we fall down as airlines a lot is that, once we do get that data and we do understand our customer, we understand what we're trying to give to them from a product perspective, and we properly communicate it, we're often not very good about making sure that it is consistent across all of the touch points of the journey, right? So I agree, the journey is very important, and that whole travel ribbon, has to be equally addressed across and has to provide the same experience across.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on our e-commerce channels right now, but if they get to the airport and it's a totally different experience, then it falls apart right there, right? The experience requires, a seamless and consistent experience across the whole ribbon. That's a big thing for us.
What I've heard is almost two steps. The first is we want to understand our customer,
Yeah.
from every aspect. Then we're thinking about their journey that they're taking, which begins long before they've mounted an airline and ends long after they've done it. And we need to apply what we know about our customers to each step in that journey.
I
Timothy?
think the point that Amy made about Uber and what Uber has done and how it appeals to the generation, legal issues aside, I think the issue is it's a bit like FedEx. What did FedEx do in package delivery that changed the model of how we perceive a package should be delivered? Is they told you what they were doing at every step of the way. It goes back to Jan Carlson's original thing about the touch points of an airline. How many times do you touch that customer, and what is the experience that you have? I don't know that it has to be consistent, but it has to be reliable and trustworthy. Everybody today can look at, Flight Stats 24 or Flight Aware and say, where is that flight? And the airline's saying, that flight's on time. And guess what? The FAA has already canceled the flight, and everybody knows it because everything is so transparent now on the web. And that's the way it should be. And I still think there's a degree of reticence on behalf of the airlines to come clean with regards to that customer experience. And it's that reticence which breeds distrust against your brand, and it hurts your your ability to communicate the value proposition. If on the one hand you're saying, hey, I'm great, I'm seamless, it's fabulous, don't worry about your connection, and here you are, there's weather in Atlanta, and you can see that weather band coming in, you know what it means. So I think you have to be a little bit more honest and truthful with the customer in communicating so that the customer experience is reliable. Even if it's not consistent, because, can I expect the same expectation from Gary from one of his baggage handlers? But he loads bags, right, Gary? Yeah. Once a year.
Your point is very valid, but the expectation back to that is you're only as good as your last mistake. Right. So if you can focus on getting the information as quickly as possible, and then getting it back to the customer in a manner that they want to see it. Is it an SMS text message? Is it an email? Is it an updated FID screen at the airport? What's the means that you can communicate with the customer? Because the customers are all over. They're not just in one location. So as the weather goes bad, as an example, it's how do you communicate with those customers, which is probably what they value the most. And we are putting at Virgin Australia a lot of emphasis on communicating with our customers as soon as we know of a problem. We're trying to be transparent. You're not 100% perfect. If we were, we could all go home. But we are getting better. And then it's rebooking that customer if required, or adjusting their flight, or putting them up in a lounge, whatever it takes to satisfy their needs. That's the key parts that some carriers do really well and some carriers don't do very well.
Yeah, I think all industries. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, there is the generation of travelers who are now the most numerous, that's millennials. They are quite happy to go and get the information or absorb the information electronically. Whereas, from when I was growing up, God, when I was a little wee lad, you had nice people come out, with a BA red cap, and they would greet you, and you'd have that wonderful, really personalized one-on-one experience, which doesn't scale well, as we know. So I think the expectation really is in that level of communication that you talked about, Gary, it is how can I be assured that I've actually touched my customer correctly? Yeah. Don't send me the message 3 days after I've arrived, did you have a nice trip? When you know that I had a lousy trip. And if Delta sends me one more email asking me how my trip went, I will go spare. You don't have to overdo this. I think it's just a little level of try and be nice to your customer. Do something as you would expect them to do, but don't overdo it.
I'd like to focus on the concept of knowing your customer and not knowing them individually because it doesn't scale, as you say, but sort of mass knowing them. all industries are trying to do this. And I think if you did maybe some may be front running the airline industry. I think if you went to people who've been successful, they'd say, look, there's three big challenges in this area. The first is silos, organizational silos and otherwise. The second is just pure integration. The third is security. And so I'd like to throw out those to each of you, sort of your thoughts as you all want to do this as challenges. The first one being, what airline industries, what do they face in the way of silos as challenges to merging their data?
But I'll start, and I think I'll give a little bit of context because, see, if you think about the merchandising that's been happening in the industry for the last 5-7 years, it's had an impact on traveler mindset. So when you say, okay, you weren't paying for bags before, now you're paying for bags. Now, okay, you got a good seat, now you're saying if you want a good seat, you got to pay for it. I think they are coming around, but what the disconnect is it isn't the same for all travelers. So tying it back to, we're moving away from mass customization, actually getting to a one-to-one marketing, so to speak. So the whole concept around personalization, and I think that is the shift that we're going to talk about today, which is how do you take merchandising that has happened in the industry for the last several years? How do you tie that up with customer data or access to customer data that you haven't had before, and how do you bring the two together, right? That is the ultimate goal and nirvana of what we're trying to talk about here. So yes, the whole industry is trying to shift towards, hey, if I really want to make, let's say, profitable, generate profitable revenue while improving my yields, with all the merchandising and retailing efforts, how do I do it in a way so that it doesn't impact my customer experience, and how do I do it in a way so that it actually helps me? And for that, what you really need is access to customer data. So today, if you look at most airlines, they typically have maybe 10 or 15% of their traveler population data on pretty much maybe a 1/6, 1/7. And then how do you build that information, that database over time? Because that is the gold mine that you really want to go after. Because if you actually understood who the traveler is, then you can figure out how you want to provide the experience across the whole journey. For an airline that chooses to be consistent, you can do it. If an airline chooses to drive variations across the different touch points, absolutely, we've seen different kinds of models. But the real problem is you've got systems, where, well, let's, lay your reservation systems, your departure control systems, your loyalty system, your campaign management system, your
Let's double them
your
up for the
CRM
last
system.
acquisitions you did.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, there's probably about anywhere from 30 to 70 different systems within an airline that touch customer data, whether they're creating, consuming, or just modifying customer data. So if that is what you're looking at, how do you bring all that together? Because that, if you can crack that code, then you can actually figure out how to bring the two together.
And there's no shortage of data. We've got so much data.
Yeah.
We understand where customers live. We understand what their propensity is to spend. We understand how frequently they travel. So the element, we understand how often we may irritate them in terms of operational delays. We know all of these things. So it's just that question, and I know we're going to get into it into later sessions, but it's that question of how we bring this information together, and then what do we do with it? What do we do with it to ensure that we can meet the needs of all these different demographic profile groups in terms of the services we provide and the way that we treat them through the channel. And I think from moving into that kind of loyalty space, that's what's going to be the loyalty product of the future, is really how you own the customer through your own experience.
I agree, and I think it all starts with the concept of a master profile, where we've always traditionally focused on P&R data, in the industry, or ticket data, and maybe we'll link those together, and that's great. But to your point, there's loyalty, there's social media, there's did we lose their bag, what was the IROP experience or operations experience of their last flight. Bringing that all together and focusing on linking it together so you have a master profile about that guest means that I won't send you that email because I know I lost your bag and you were 2 hours delayed, instead of already giving you a little token compensation to hopefully make it a little bit better, because I know that about you because I see that in your master profile. And also being able to see that throughout their journey so that it's not the airport agent who doesn't see that, who says, "Oh, sir, so glad to have you back. You had a great flight last time, right?" And you didn't, So they see that was your problem. So linking it all together, I think, is the key in sort of a master profile view. And having it live in a place where all of the touch points can read it is important.
Yeah.
Traditionally airlines have gone with a CRM model that is separate from all of their reservation program. And that's really difficult. You have to link it back, you have to integrate it, and we all know that integrating a lot of these systems is really challenging. So having it in your reservation system is really important.
Well, and I would say that the challenge is even more magnified when it comes to international travel when you're dependent on partner airlines
Oh, yeah,
to deliver
definitely.
the service right
Yeah.
to your customer. And I think, Wes, to your point, regarding security and data security and personally identifiable information, how much do you share with your partners, especially, and you like to think that your partners have your best interest in mind, but ultimately it's a co-opetition, if you will, between partners. And so trying to leverage that across partners makes it much more difficult.
And maybe a question, for the panel, right? At least based on what we hear, based on what we see, we believe that merchandising efforts over the last few years has had an impact on customer experience. That if airlines can't really crack the code on how to get to that individual level marketing based on persona and based on the most recent experience, you're going to run into a situation where you're going to send them irrelevant information, right, or information that's going to annoy, irritate them, right? So I'd love to get thoughts on how much merchandising over the last few years has had an impact on the overall customer experience.
So this is a perfect example, and we all hear this example, right, of the lounge yearly owner who gets offered the lounge in the check-in flow because
That's right.
because
That's
the
right.
airline doesn't realize that's who
That's
they
right.
are,
That's right. Happens
or
to everybody, right?
the elite member who gets offered to purchase a bag when they get one for free. I mean, that's the kind of merchandising that the guests are like, come on now, you know that I am this person, so why would you offer that to me?
Or bonus miles for a flight that
Right.
don't add up to my status as a tier member.
Yeah.
Right.
I guess just help me a little bit of history. I thought that airlines probably invented this. We're probably going back to the 70s, but you're the first with probably to marry up data with technology on customers. Now I get a sense that there's a feeling that maybe we've slipped a bit. I mean, we always want to do better, but I think it's going beyond that. We feel we've slipped a little bit behind what other industries are doing. With a view towards what we have to do in the future, what happened in the past? Why did we slow down?
So I think,
No, without Ian, go for it.
Ian, please.
as the airline industry kind of evolved and, systems, the airlines were, as you say, they had very sophisticated systems in the 60s and the 70s. They connected each other together. They've created these distribution networks, alliance partnerships, the ability to ensure that we can account between each other in terms of all of the accounting transactions that need to take. We can move passengers, we can move baggage. But it was built on an old infrastructure. It was built on a
custom infrastructure.
Yeah,
I imagine.
and today it was the Uber of
Yeah.
60s, and from there we went into retailing around, people could book tickets online, and
Yeah.
did you know you could go to the internet and you could buy an air ticket? These were the kind of advances we had made at the time, and I think, yes, we have kind of fallen behind. Low-cost carriers came about, and their need to be part of this big infrastructure and this big distribution network wasn't a requirement. So they had their own website to distribute their product. And at the end of the day, they had a lot more flexibility and freedom to sell different types of products and weren't hampered by the types of issues that the more kind
The
of
older
legacy
technologies, for
carriers
example.
were with. So, low-cost carriers then became pioneers in terms of their abilities and starting to break the products down and offer more of an a la carte kind of offering in terms of giving customers more choice and starting to improve the customer experience and the relevance of these various products to customers from a choice perspective. And then the low-cost carriers kind of saw what the legacy carriers were doing and started to understand that just using their website from a distribution perspective wasn't enough to keep the aircraft full. So they needed to ensure that they could start to get a piece of the action with regards to how one can start to build connectivity between. So the low-cost community has started to look to more of the legacy type systems to ensure that from a distribution perspective they can start to increase. So I think we've all kind of ended up in a space where we're now kind of grappling with a lot of these technology choices, and I think a lot of the technology service providers have seen this and have seen this coming and are really now starting to adjust their products and their systems to ensure that we can start to make sense of all these disparate systems. We can bring this data together, and at the end of the day we can start to understand our customers better, But what is key is to ensure that, once we have this ability, we're able to ensure that we can, to Amy's point, consistently apply that data and consistently apply the insights that we have within that specific data to ensure that we can bring this customer experience through and ultimately deliver a product that's appropriate to each of our customers' needs.
There's an old business saw about the first mover advantage, but there's also first mover disadvantage as well sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Timothy?
I think there's, I'm a believer in Newton's second law. To every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And what I see is that there is this still kind of basic assumption that it's okay as long as I don't screw up too badly. And as long as I don't do something really badly, terribly wrong, I'm okay. But I think we're beyond that point. I think there's several things that need to happen. We all know that our process of data and data turning to information is strictly flawed within our industry. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. Call a spade a spade. What's the impact of that on the customer experience is he doesn't trust. He has a very low level of trust. And we haven't been good about explaining to him why it's like this. We have an incredibly complicated product. There's no two ways about it. It's a complex product. It's hard to deliver that product. And it has a lot of variances in it. But what should we be doing? Going back to, I think, your question, West. In my view, first of all, airlines have fallen behind in their spend. They're not spending enough. But you have to start kind of there. Compared to other industries who've really upped their game in digital spend, I don't think airlines spend enough. Number two is, I think that there's not been enough groundswell of opinion around solving the core data problem, which is, where are all the pieces? How do I get that delivery? We sit here building yet another patch on top of stuff to gather the data to create an image of data, and it moves further and further away from the core thing that you're actually doing. So it's that lack of, I would say, it's the distance between the core data and my ability to use that data has now lengthened to a point where it's abstraction upon abstraction. And we have to go back to some of those core levels. It's hard, you're right, no two ways about it. And I think this is where it's going to be hard. The third thing is, now that airlines have realized that there is such a thing called product differentiation, and that is now very clear, and it differentiates, the brand has value. The reemergence of the value of the brand and the reemergence of products against those brands and what they mean is something that the systems need to match. So do you have one size fits everything? No, absolutely not. How Amy does her product, doesn't matter if her market is different from how Ian and how Gary do their products. Doesn't matter that they're in different markets. They have a different brand proposition. That brand proposition must be executed against and must be realistic to the consumer. Too often we've made it unrealistic. So I believe that you have to kind of go backwards to go forwards here, because it's still too hard to get to these pieces. We have too much heavy lifting to do to make even an incremental increase. You've got to go back and start looking at the core plumbing.
So I'd like to ask a question. Is it also, I have a hypothesis that it's not just about all of the digitalization, which I think is very, very key. But if you focus on digitalization in one area, as Amy pointed out earlier, that can all fall apart when the gate agent refuses to do something because of a union contract or just flat out. But how do you take that digitalization and get it into the culture of the carrier?
Yeah, I think that is a challenge. So, whilst one needs to build the systems and those systems need to be integrated, you have to, as part of your customer experience plan, put the customer to your organization in terms of the importance of the customer. And that really becomes part of what is your vision, what is your overall company mission, and what does the importance of this customer have in terms of your core ability to get revenue out of the customer ultimately and be commercially successful. So yes, there is that human element. There always is the human element in customer service delivery, and I think airlines need to take that seriously. You need to implement programs. We've got now a specific customer experience department that just is a facilitator within our organization. It's a facilitator to ensure. It's not there to take ownership of the problem, but it's there to facilitate between the different areas of the business to ensure that they come together and they solve the problem that may be experienced by the customer. So, these are the types of initiatives that you need to ensure, and you need to start connecting those dots in order for you to be able to deliver at the end of the day.
And kind of mirroring your point with Timothy's, it is really difficult to start kind of, back from the core and commit to getting all the right data in the right place. Data has changed. We can't rely on P&R and ticket data or even loyalty data. It's got to be all of the other data that has to come in.
Right.
But to your point, from a culture perspective, that is a huge commitment. And if you falter in your execution of that commitment, then you will never ever get there. And so that kind of goes back to what Timothy was saying, where if we have to kind of get back to the core and build it, right? And that is a really large commitment for an airline to take. So, kind of to your point of having a culture where you actually agree this is what we're going to do and embrace it, and then push forward and make sure that you don't get distracted. I mean, that is a cultural shift in an airline, for especially the airlines of today,
But it ultimately comes down to your people.
Yeah.
You can have all the data in the world, you can analyze it
Absolutely.
a million ways.
Everybody
but
has to embrace that.
Ultimately, it
Yeah.
comes down to your people. How do you treat the customer when times are good? How do you treat the customer in times of disrupt? So on and so forth. That's what it comes down to. Train your people accordingly, give them the tools to do their job day in and day out, and empower them to make decisions. Too many carriers and too many individuals are afraid to make a decision because they're worried about the consequences if they do. If you let your people do the right thing, most things will fall into place.
And that's fine until you get to the point where Menzies is the person delivering the customer experience. And that customer experience problem just goes right out the window, because guess what? Menzies doesn't have the same core ethics that you do.
And that's a valid point, but that comes down to managing your subcontractors.
That's exactly right. That's about
That's a management issue.
instilling
and
your
we all have to
culture
worry.
in them.
We all have that, no matter where you fly, no matter the
Exactly.
size of the carrier. You depend on third-party providers in certain locations to do certain aspects of your business or support certain aspects of your business. But it comes down to, at the end of the day, how do you manage those third-party providers, and ultimately, their people become your people, so you have to train those individuals as well. And a lot of carriers lose sight of it, and they don't treat them as an employee of their own. They treat them as just a third-party contract.
But
Exactly.
the other thing that you need to solve, is, and to the point of giving your employees discretion, discretion gets applied in so many different ways. And what you don't want to end up with is a manual on somebody's desk to say, well, if option A has happened, what do I do? And I have to go through the pages, and your customer's standing in front of you and they're upset. So engineering your systems, and building in abilities to understand the value of the person that's in front of you, know what that person's value are, and know how to apply discretion through your check-in system, through your ability to be discretional in whatever policy may well exist. So it's building in that customer data element, and it's building in the discretion into your systems, your operational systems, to allow your staff to the customer obviously be seen as being empathetic.
I agree. I think that's how you marry, your basic, this is how we treat our guests, and we're empowering our teammates to make decisions. The next step, and to bring it to the next level, you do need to marry those things together. And I think you give them, the ability to understand and the power to make the decision, and they will make and then you train them to do the right thing. They will make the right decision. But that's taking it to the next step.
Yeah.
Because we all like to believe that we've kind of instilled that culture in our airlines. I think the three of us, from our airline, culture perspective, are similar in that way. It's taking it to the next level.
Yeah, that brings us a pretty opportune question from Brian Porter, who sent it in via Twitter, which is how important is it to empower staff at each customer touch point in order to deliver a great experience? Which I think is what we're talking about now, but maybe we can double click on that a little bit. You're an individual staff person. You're probably been on the airline maybe a year or two, relatively junior. You want to do the right thing. What makes you, A, digitally aware, B, able to use that and use the data that's out there? Vanita, I see you smiling.
Yeah,
so I think you might have the answer for us.
Yeah, so I think it goes back to the point that Amy was making a few minutes earlier, which is it isn't a particular touch point that you're trying to emphasize, it's the whole journey that you're trying to emphasize. And what typically happens in today's world is a traveler usually finds out about some kind of a notification or an event before the agent actually does.
Yeah.
So the traveler is informing the agent that this has happened, and the agent scrambling, calling, and then on the radio, and so like, what's actually going on? So when you think about the the experience across the entire journey, whether it is, pre-booking or while booking, trip, pre-trip, at the airport, what have you. It's empowering the agents. So you gather all this customer information. Of course, you've got activities happening, events happening, and then how do you make that available to the agent, whether it is at the call center, at the check-in counter in the lounge or in flight, to say, you know what, this is exactly what's happening, and how do you actually go communicate that? The other part, which gets really interesting, and we'll talk about it in the next session, is how do you enable staff to have more intelligent conversations? Because the staff can give the same message to 10 people who are on the line, but if the staff knows that, 3 of them are really valuable to me, how do you have very personalized and relevant conversations with them? So that is what we'll talk about a little bit later on, but that is where the future's going.
And I think, Ian, I'd like to step back just a moment. You mentioned that you've put a kind of a team in charge of customer experience. I know in the technology side of the business, we like to say that innovation can occur anywhere. But when it comes to customer experience, who at your airline, and we've talked about it in empowering, right, the frontline staff, but who at the airline owns customer experience?
What we all do. And that's the thing with the customer experience team. The customer experience team are not the people taking it on the chin. The business needs to own the problem. So the customer experience team is there to assist in collecting the data, bringing the data together, ordering the data, simplifying the data, because we've got data in so many different areas and in so many different formats. So, how do we bring that together? How do we share that with business? But business needs to, each operational team, each person, each executive involved in each step of the journey, they need to take ownership of that, and they need to ensure that at the end of the day, they're dealing with the issues. And we as an organization strategically need to ensure that we're giving the business the tools that are required. We need rules engines. Rules engines have got to help assist to Brian's question. How do we provide discretion? Right. We need a rules engine. We need something to say, if a customer has a value of X, we need to be able to do Y. If a customer who's a high-value customer comes to the counter and is 2 kilos overweight today, you know what? It's fine to waiver that bag. Let's not have an argument with this customer because we need him. So, those are the types of things, and you need that sophistication built into your infrastructure to ensure that at the end of the day, that type of delivery is consistent across every airport that you operate through, and that customer doesn't get an inconsistent, waiver and privilege from one airport and then has a massive argument at another, because at the end of the day. So that becomes a very important part of that customer experience delivery.
I'd like to up the ante on that. My theory is that the customer experience in airlines is made during a time of disruption. It's made during the exception there. And I'm wondering, how do you, it's easy to make a set of rules that are followed when things are going smoothly. How do you ensure that the right thing happens when things aren't going smoothly? Gary, do you have a view on that?
I'm not sure if you can be 100% accurate in that, right? You're only as good as your last mistake.
Yeah.
But it goes back to Ian's point, you have certain types of guests. You have your high-value platinum VIP club members that expect to be treated in a certain way. Then you have other people that their expectations are completely different. What you need to do is, for what we do at Virgin Australia, is we really try to focus on the high-value guests in time of disrupt.
Yeah.
Move them first, because they're the ones that are traveling the most, most of the time on business. Satisfy their needs first, and then we work our way down. I'll just call it down the ladder and to the other guests. But you need to focus on the core expectation of the high-value guests, and for them, for the bulk of them, and I think it's pretty much worldwide, they want to go from point A to point B on time, safely, in a clean airplane with consistent service. So in times of disrupt, how can I get that person back on their journey as quickly as possible? Because really, that's what they value the most.
Well, and I'll be a little contrarian, sorry about that, but I think that actually experience is what happens every single day.
Okay.
And the reason I feel that way is, a guest can come on your airline and have a very average blah experience, and they build their expectation of your brand based on that. Now, yes, when things aren't going well, that ups the ante and it changes their expectation of you. But my point is, every single day, we want to give a good experience, right? We want to have a good experience, what they're expecting, consistent, safe, great people. Our people are our differentiator every single day. How you interact with our contact center, our airports, our in-flight team members, our pilots, our entire crew. That is what sets the experience every single day for Virgin America. How they handle the difficult times, absolutely make or break, an original guest expectation of us or experience with us. And so, we just, think about empowering them to do the right thing, based on, who the guest is in front of them, but, treating all guests as well as they possibly can. Yes, each guest has a slightly different expectation of what they're looking for, but every guest is important. And so making sure that all of our frontline teammates are very empowered to treat all of those guests as well as they can.
That's what I've seen in other industries, is that things are going to go wrong and you can't stop them from going wrong. The best answer is empowering the people who are going to be on site, handling the problem, giving them the morale, the tools, the people to respond to that. And because that's the only way that exceptions truly get handled and handled well.
Yeah, to my point earlier, it's your frontline people, how you train them, and the ability for them to make decisions on their own without feeling that they might have some bad recourse if they make a decision that's not exactly popular.
Absolutely.
So you have to empower your employees.
You really have that. This issue, obviously I'm a fairly frequent flyer, and what I notice is that within airlines, there is still a bit of a culture that says, oh, it's not my problem, here's the hot potato, I'll hand it over to the other guy. So the in-flight crew go, yeah, it's okay, we're going to land, yes, go see the guy out there, just go past and you'll be fine, because he's got all the answers. And the classic example of this was the airline I fly fairly frequently, equipped all of their staff with an iPad, right? And Wi-Fi on the flight, so they've got all the tool. So I said, can you tell me which gate we're coming into? No, I haven't been trained on this yet. So what are you doing? Oh, I'm shopping. She was a commuter carrier flight attendant, so you're several generations away, and she didn't know what to do. Now, she was doing the best. She was perfectly great with the regular service, but that's an example where you've given somebody the tool, they don't know, and very often they don't want to use the tool. It's that ability to say, okay, I've empowered you with this tool. Do you actually want to use it?
Yeah.
And she should have put it away, because she would have given a much better answer back.
Right.
And then there's the other case, where the cheery captain comes on and says, yeah, we're going to be only 4 hours late, and we're landing, and everything is fine. Thanks very much, guys. And the flight attendant is dealing with all these really angry people.
Yeah. But see, this is exactly my point, is the experience is every single day.
Yeah.
That changed your experience on that flight, which was just a normal flight.
Yeah.
But, having the experience every single day be consistent and being good, then, if your teammates are treating guests well all the time, when something does happen, then, it's a little bit easier to deal with. Because now you're ticked off if something had happened and you had an irregular operation.
I have a low expectation.
Low expectation, anyway. Right?
Yes.
Because you haven't been treated well every single day, right? So that's part of it.
Folks, we're drawing to the end of the first session. I want to thank everybody for the comments. Thank you for the questions that came in. We'll answer more next time. We're going to start again on the hour, and what we'll be focusing on is the next generation. This will be asking the panelists, okay, we've talked about it in theory. What are you actually doing here, and what are the challenges that you're getting?